There's a chemical reaction running in your brain right now. You didn't start it. You can't feel it. And if you're between 30 and 55, building something that matters, there's a strong chance it's been running for years. Everything you've been told about stress is the opposite of what your brain actually does with it. You were taught that stress is a feeling, something that happens to you. A bad week, a hard quarter, a pressure that builds up and then eventually passes. So you manage it the way everyone manages it. You push through. You stay composed. You tell yourself you've got it handled. And here's the part nobody warns you about. The better you are at appearing to handle it, the more dangerous it becomes. Because your brain was never designed to tell the difference between a predator and a deadline, between a real threat to your life and a meeting that didn't go your way. The same ancient alarm fires for both. And when that alarm stops shutting off, when it runs quietly in the background, day after day, year after year, it stops protecting you. It starts rewriting you. Stay with me, because what comes next is going to reframe things you've been calling personality. The way you snap at the people you love the moment you walk through your own front door. The weight that settled around your middle and won't move, no matter what you cut from your plate. The decisions that felt sharp and certain in the moment and look, in hindsight, like fear wearing the mask of logic. You've been treating these as separate problems. They're not. They're symptoms. Symptoms of one chemical running unchecked in the one organ you can't afford to lose. I'm going to show you 3 things over the course of this conversation. First, what's actually happening inside your skull when stress goes from a spike to a constant. The real mechanism, not the motivational poster version. You'll understand why willpower has almost nothing to do with it. Second, the single most common mistake high-functioning people make with stress. It's not that they ignore it. It's far more subtle and far more costly. You're probably making it right now as you watch this, and you'd swear you were doing the opposite. And third, this is the part that matters, the way out. Not a breathing trick, not a productivity hack. A genuine re-engineering of the brain itself, built on a property neuroscientists didn't even believe existed when I was in medical school. By the end of this, you won't just understand the trap. You'll understand the lever. Let me prove I'm not exaggerating before we go any further. A few years ago, on the trading floors of major banks, men in their 40s and 50s started dying. Heart attacks. Sudden, brutal, and on the floor itself. And here's what made it strange. These weren't men with high blood pressure, not high cholesterol. Many didn't smoke. By every number on the chart, they were fine. The thing killing them wasn't on any chart. It was stress, and stress alone, having quietly inflamed their cardiovascular systems from the inside until something gave. The institutions wanted a medical fix, a wellness program, something physical, because physical is what they understood. And the doctor brought in to help told them the truth they couldn't hear. You cannot fix this in the body because it isn't starting in the body. It's starting in the brain, in a perception of threat that never resolves. They couldn't grasp it. The idea that something invisible, a feeling they prided themselves on suppressing, was strong enough to stop a heart. But it is. And the same force strong enough to do that is more than strong enough to quietly run your decisions, your relationships, and your sense of who you are. So the question isn't whether this is happening in you. If you're alive and you're driven, some version of it is. The question is what it's costing you that you haven't connected yet, and whether the wiring that got you here can be changed. It can. I'm going to show you exactly how. But first, you need to see what this thing actually does once it gets inside. Here's what nobody tells you about the stress response. It was built to save your life in 90 seconds, then disappear. That's the design. A threat appears. Your brain's alarm center, a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala, fires before you've even consciously registered danger. It floods your system with cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, released from glands sitting just above your kidneys. Your heart rate climbs, blood rushes to your muscles. Your focus narrows to a single point. You're ready to fight or to run. And then, when the threat passes, the level falls. Back to baseline, the way it's supposed to. A spike, up and then down. That's a healthy stress response. You need it. You'd be dead without it. But ask yourself something. When was the last time the threat actually passed? The deadline doesn't pass. There's another one behind it. The financial pressure doesn't resolve. It just changes shape. The worry about your kids, your marriage, your standing, the thing you said in that meeting, it doesn't end. It loops. And your brain, which cannot tell the difference between a lion and a quarterly target, keeps the alarm on. Not spiking, sustained. A low, constant hum of cortisol that never returns to baseline. This is the line almost everyone misses. The problem was never stress. Stress is adaptive. The problem is stress that never turns off. And when cortisol stays elevated, not for 90 seconds, but for months, for years, your brain stops reading it as a passing event. It reads it as the new normal, an ongoing, permanent threat to your survival. And it begins to act accordingly. Watch what becomes observable on the outside. Your sleep starts to fray. Cortisol is part of your 24-hour clock. It's meant to rise in the morning to wake you and fall at night to release you into sleep. When it's chronically high, that rhythm breaks. You lie awake at 3 a.m. with a mind that won't quiet, then drag yourself up exhausted. Not because you're undisciplined, because the chemical that wakes you never powered down. Your body changes in a way that humiliates people. Cortisol, as a survival mechanism, instructs your body to store fat, specifically around the abdomen, because in an ancient famine, that reserve kept you alive. So the weight settles at your middle, and when you do what everyone does, eat less, move more, it doesn't budge. Because you're treating a symptom while the cause keeps signaling. As long as the cortisol leaks, the body holds the reserve. Then there's the part that touches everyone around you. You keep it together at work, barely. But the moment you walk through your own front door and your child needs something, or your partner asks one small thing too many, you snap. And here's what that snap actually means. If you're one step from breaking at home, you're one step from breaking at work too. The composure is thinner than you think. Have you ever walked out of a meeting with someone and felt completely, inexplicably drained? Like something was pulled out of you that you can't name? Hold on to that feeling. We're coming back to it, because it reveals something about stress that almost no one understands, that it doesn't stay contained inside the person carrying it. But before that, a harder question. You can see these symptoms now. The sleep, the weight, the short fuse. What you can't see is why your brain chose to do this to you. Why an organ designed to protect you would inflame your own heart, disrupt your own sleep, store fat against your own will. The answer isn't a malfunction. That's the unsettling part. Your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. It's just doing it in the wrong century, against the wrong threats, on a timeline that never ends. To understand the way out, you have to go one level deeper, past what you can see, into the machinery itself. So why does an organ built to protect you turn against you? To answer that, you have to understand what cortisol actually is at the chemical level, and why your brain trusts it completely. Cortisol isn't the villain. It's a messenger, and it carries one message: survive now, pay later. When that message floods your system, it triggers a cascade designed for a single emergency. It diverts energy to your muscles. It sharpens short-term focus. It suppresses everything the body considers non-essential in a crisis: digestion, immune response, long-term repair, reproduction. Brilliant for 90 seconds. Catastrophic for 90 weeks. Because cortisol's deeper job is inflammation. In a real injury, inflammation is how you heal. It rushes resources to damaged tissue. But chronic cortisol means chronic inflammation, with no wound to heal. So the body inflames itself. Your vascular system, the lining around your heart. This is the mechanism that killed those men on the trading floor. Not a clogged artery, but a system quietly inflamed from within until it failed. No high cholesterol required, just a threat signal that never switched off. Now here's where it reaches the brain itself and where it gets personal. Your brain has receptors that read cortisol levels constantly, scanning for one thing. How much danger am I in? When the level stays high, those receptors conclude there's an imminent, permanent threat to survival. And under that conclusion, the brain reorganizes its own priorities. The region that handles complex thought, emotional regulation, long-range planning, the prefrontal cortex, the most evolved part of you, gets downgraded. Deliberately. Because in a survival emergency, you don't need nuance. You don't need to weigh 6 options or regulate your tone. You need to react. So the brain shifts power away from the thoughtful, strategic part of you and hands it to the fast, reactive, threat-detecting part. Sit with what that means. Under chronic stress, you are neurochemically demoted from your best self to your most primitive one. The version of you that thinks clearly, decides wisely, stays calm under pressure. That version is running on reduced power. And the version that snaps, that catastrophizes, that grabs the fast and fearful answer, that version is in charge. This is why willpower fails here. You're not weak. You're outvoted by your own chemistry. And it explains something you've felt but never named. Why your worst decisions tend to cluster in your most stressed seasons. Why, looking back, certain choices feel less like judgment and more like reaction in disguise. You weren't thinking, you were surviving and calling it thinking. There's a phrase for the slow version of this damage that I want you to hold. The brain is plastic. It is shaped physically by what runs through it most often. And cortisol, running constantly, doesn't just affect you today. It carves grooves. It deepens the reactive pathways and starves the reflective ones, until reacting becomes who you are. But pause on that word. Plastic. Shapeable. Because if chronic stress can carve the brain in the wrong direction, then something can carve it back. That's the entire hope of this conversation, and we will get there. First, though, we have to confront the mistake. Because everything I've described, the inflammation, the demotion, the carving, depends on one thing: the stress staying invisible. And the way high-functioning people keep it invisible is the exact error that lets it run. You think you're managing it. Watch what that actually does. Here's the mistake. And I want you to feel how counterintuitive it is, because the people who make it most are the people who'd swear they're doing the opposite. The error isn't ignoring stress. The error is suppressing it, and mistaking suppression for management. Think about how a capable person handles pressure. They don't fall apart. They don't complain. They absorb it. They keep the worry off their face, the strain out of their voice, the fear away from their team. They tell themselves, "I won't let them see it. I'll hold the line. I've got this." And the world rewards them for it. With promotions, with trust, with the reputation of being unshakable. But your face is not your nervous system. You can hide stress from a room. You cannot hide it from your own bloodstream. The cortisol doesn't care whether you look composed. It floods your system whether or not your expression cooperates. So every time you stay strong by pushing the signal down instead of resolving it, you're not removing the threat. You're just removing your awareness of it, while it keeps running underneath, doing every single thing we've described. This is the trap. Suppression feels like strength. It's actually concealment. You've hidden the fire from yourself, and then wondered why the house keeps filling with smoke. And it gets worse, because suppression has a tell. Ask the people closest to you. The executives who insisted they kept stress hidden. I never show them the numbers. I never let them see me sweat. Were always certain their teams couldn't feel it. They were wrong. Stress doesn't stay contained in the person carrying it. A leader's internal state sets the emotional temperature of everyone beneath them. Your stress, suppressed, doesn't vanish. It radiates. It shapes the room before you've said a word. Remember that drained feeling? Walking out of a meeting hollowed out, unable to say why. That's this. You absorbed something the other person swore they were hiding. And in your own life, when you're the most stressed person in the building, everyone below you is quietly paying a tax they can't see and you won't admit. So here's the contra-intuitive truth that should land hard. The more impressively you suppress, the more invisibly you spread. The composure that earns you respect is the same composure that hides the damage long enough for it to compound, in you and in everyone who orbits you. And there's one final layer, the cruelest one. Suppression doesn't just hide the cost. It changes your story about yourself. You stop saying, "I'm under enormous stress," and start saying, "I'm just irritable. I'm just bad at sleep. I just have a temper. This is just who I am now." That's the moment the trap closes. The second you file a symptom under personality instead of stress, you stop trying to change it. You've quietly accepted it as identity. And identity, you don't fight. You just live inside it. How many things have you already filed that way? The short fuse, the 3 a.m. ceiling staring, the weight, the reactivity you've made peace with. What if none of it is who you are? What if it's just who you've become, under a chemical you never agreed to host? I want to show you what this looks like in a real life. Not a statistic, a person. Someone who did everything right by the world's definition and never once saw the thing that was running underneath. Let me tell you about him. There was a man, a 51-year-old founder in Chicago, who had built everything he was supposed to want. 2 companies. The second one larger than the first. A house his parents could never have imagined. 3 kids in good schools. A marriage that, from the outside, looked solid. He was the man others called when their own plans fell apart. Steady, decisive, the one who never flinched. And he was proud of one thing above all. He never let them see him sweat. Not his investors, not his team, not his wife. Whatever pressure came, and it came constantly, he absorbed it, smoothed his face, and kept moving. He believed that was the job. He believed that was strength. In a way, the whole identity was built on it. I'm the one who holds steady when everyone else breaks. He'd noticed things, of course. The weight that had crept around his middle in his late 40s, the weight that no diet touched. He blamed his metabolism, getting older. He'd noticed the sleep, awake at 3, mind churning through problems that had no business being awake with him. Then, up at 6 anyway, running on fumes and coffee. He blamed the workload. He'd noticed the way he came home, and within 20 minutes was sharp with the kids over nothing, snapping when his daughter asked a second question, going cold when his wife wanted to talk. He blamed the long days. He told himself he'd be better on the weekend. He told himself that for years. What he never did, not once, was connect them. The weight, the sleep, the temper, the slow erosion of patience with the people he loved most. To him, they were 4 unrelated problems, each with its own ordinary excuse. He never saw the single thread running through all of them. He never named the thing, because naming it would have meant admitting he wasn't handling it, and he was the man who handled things. His wife noticed before he did. She'd stopped bringing up the hard conversations, not because they were resolved, but because she'd learned the cost of starting them. The kids had learned too. They'd learned the rhythm of his moods, which questions were safe, which evenings to stay out of his way. The house had quietly reorganized itself around a tension no one was allowed to name. He thought he was protecting them from his stress. He was marinating them in it, and the decisions. In his most pressured stretch, he made a series of calls, fast, certain, defensive, that he'd later struggle to explain. A partnership he torched over a slight that, in hindsight, wasn't one. A key person he drove out by being someone he didn't recognize. At the time, every choice felt like clarity, like instinct. He didn't know he was being governed by a chemical that had quietly demoted the part of him capable of seeing straight. The morning it caught up with him, he was tying his shoes. A pressure in his chest he assumed was indigestion. A tightness down one arm he tried to stretch out. He was 51. His cholesterol was fine. His blood pressure was fine. Every number on every chart said he was a healthy man. He sat down on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in 20 years, he couldn't push through it. Lying in that hospital bed afterward, alive but shaken in a way he'd never been, he kept circling one thought. Not why me? Something quieter and worse. How long had it been running, and how did I never feel it? He'd spent a lifetime learning to not feel it. That was the whole skill. That was the pride. He'd never once asked what it was costing him to not feel it.
There's a scene I want you to carry with you after this video ends. It's a kitchen table. Same couple, the one I keep coming back to. 55 now, both of them. The house quieter than it used to be. And I want you to see two versions of that table because both are real, and which one becomes yours is being decided right now by decisions that feel far too small to matter. In the first version, it's a Tuesday afternoon and the phone rings. A pleasant voice, an opportunity, a window closing Friday. In this version, they say yes that same week, because that's what they've always done. They took the cheap advice. They kept the house that didn't fit. They moved to cash the year the market scared them, and now, at 68, the math is just tight, not catastrophic. Tight. They run the numbers more than they'd like to. They say no to the trip again. None of it came from one disaster. It came from 100 small moments where they let someone else hold the clock. The table is fine. It's just smaller than it should have been. In the second version, it's the same Tuesday, the same call, the same closing Friday voice. And one of them says the sentence. Sounds interesting. We'll think about it for a week and call you back. They hang up. They never call back. They almost never do, once the week passes. And here's what's strange about this version. Nothing dramatic ever happened in it. There's no story to tell, just a couple who, again and again, refused to be rushed, who asked the empty bedroom question and moved, who sat still when the market fell, who waited 7 days every time. And at 68, the table is bigger. The trip happens. The math isn't tight because over 20 years, the difference between the two tables was never one big win. It was the absence of 5 quiet losses. That's the whole thing. You will not become wealthy in the second half of your life by finding the one perfect investment. You'll get there by not losing, by refusing the 5 traps, one unhurried decision at a time. The blueprint was never about moving faster. It was about being the one person in the room who's willing to wait. So before you go, 3 things, and they each take less than a minute. First, subscribe. If any of this told you the truth, that's the whole reason this channel exists, and I want you here for the next one. Second, share this with 5 people you actually care about. Not strangers, 5 people over 40 whose kitchen table you want to see bigger in 20 years. This is the kind of thing nobody says to us out loud, and somebody should. Third, leave a comment. Tell me which of the 5 traps caught you or almost did. I read them, and your honesty helps someone scrolling past who thinks they're the only one. And then carry this with you. The clock was never your enemy. The rush was. Slow down, and the same years that once forgave your mistakes will quietly start protecting you from them.
The lever is called neuroplasticity, and when I was in medical school, we didn't believe it existed. We were taught the opposite, that the brain finished forming in early adulthood and then set, like concrete. Whatever you were, anxious, reactive, stuck, you'd stay. We now know that was wrong. The brain remains shapeable for your entire life, not just in childhood, at 40, at 60, and beyond. If you subject it to stimulus intense enough, repeated enough, deliberate enough, it physically rewires. That cuts both ways, and that's the whole point. Chronic cortisol rewired you in the wrong direction by accident, through repetition you never chose. Neuroplasticity lets you rewire in the right direction on purpose. Same mechanism, opposite intent. Here's the blueprint. 4 stages. None of them are willpower. The first is awareness, and it's half the battle, literally. The trap only works while the stress stays filed under personality. So the first move is to drag it back out. Every symptom you've made peace with, the short fuse, the 3 a.m. ceiling, the weight, the reactivity. Stop calling it who I am. Start calling it what's running. That single reframe reopens a door you'd quietly bricked shut. You can't change an identity. You can change a chemical state. The second is focused attention. Don't try to fix anything yet. Just watch. Where does the surge fire? Which situations? Which people? Which hours? You're not managing stress here. You're locating it, tracing the groove before you try to redirect it. The third is deliberate practice, and this is where the brain physically changes. You will not get it right the first time. The old pathway is deep. It's the path of least resistance, and your energy-hungry brain will default to it under pressure. So you practice the new response when the surge comes. You fail. You practice again. Maybe you hold the new pattern 30% of the time, then 50, then more. And every repetition strengthens the new pathway and starves the old one. Until one day the new response is the default, and you don't have to fight for it. That's not motivation. That's myelination. That's biology, working for you instead of against you. The fourth is accountability, because left alone, everyone abandons stage 3 the moment it gets hard. You need an external structure, a person, a practice, something outside your own willpower that holds the line when your willpower folds. This isn't weakness, it's design. The people who change are simply the ones who built scaffolding around the change. Now, if you've stayed with me this far, you're already not the average viewer. Most people felt the discomfort of the cortisol section and clicked away, because seeing the trap is harder than living in it. You didn't. You're the small fraction who actually finishes the hard thing. Subscribe, so the next blueprint finds you. Because the people who do this work tend to keep doing it, and I'd rather build alongside the ones who stay. And if something here cut close to the bone, you already know why. Back to the lever, because there's one piece left, and it's the foundation under all 4 stages. You cannot rewire a brain that's still drowning in cortisol. The reflective system has to come back online first, which means the unglamorous basics aren't optional extras, they're the precondition. Sleep that runs the full cleaning cycle. Movement gentle enough to lower cortisol, not spike it. Resolving the stress signal instead of suppressing it. Getting it out through honest conversation, through writing, through anything that stops it looping in silence. Get those right, and the brain has enough power to change. Skip them, and no technique on earth will hold. That's the architecture. Now let me show you what it looks like when someone actually lives it. Quietly, without fanfare. There was a woman, a 44-year-old surgeon in Seattle, who didn't have a breakdown. That's what made her story so easy to miss. Nothing dramatic happened to her. No collapse, no hospital bed, no moment that split her life into before and after. She just noticed something small one evening. Her teenage son had asked her a question at dinner, an ordinary question, and she'd snapped at him, the way she always did. And she watched his face do the thing it had learned to do. Close, just slightly. Brace. Wait for the weather to pass. And for the first time, she didn't file it under, "I'm just tired." She let herself see it for what it was. Not personality. Not a bad day. A pattern. A groove she'd been deepening for years, while telling herself it was just how she was. That was the whole beginning. No revelation. Just the refusal to keep calling it her character. What she did next was quiet and unimpressive. She didn't overhaul her life. She started sleeping like it was part of the job, not a reward for finishing it. She moved her body in the mornings, not punishing herself in a gym, just enough to let the system discharge what it was holding. She started writing down the things that looped in her head at night, getting them out of her skull and onto a page where they couldn't chase their own tails. And she told one person, a colleague she trusted, what she was working on, so that someone besides her own willpower was watching. Then came the hard part, the part nobody sees, catching the surge before it became a snap. The first weeks, she missed it almost every time. She'd hear her own voice go sharp and only register it afterward, too late. But she'd notice. And noticing, repeated, is its own kind of practice. Slowly, the gap widened. She started catching it in the moment instead of after. Then, sometimes, before. Not perfectly, not always. But the new response was becoming a real road, and the old one was going quiet from disuse. Here's what changed, and here's what didn't. Her career didn't transform. She didn't get a promotion, or a windfall, or a dramatic external reward. From the outside, almost nothing was different. But her son started talking to her again. Really talking. The long, meandering conversations she hadn't realized had stopped. He stopped reading her face before he spoke. The house lost a tension no one had ever named, and the absence of it was the first time anyone noticed it had been there at all. And she'd tell you, if you asked, that the strangest part wasn't feeling calmer. It was a quieter thing. She started to recognize herself again. The patient version. The one who'd been there underneath the whole time, just outvoted by a chemical for the better part of a decade. She didn't become someone new. That's the part that matters, the part that makes it possible for you. She didn't manufacture a better self out of nothing. She just stopped letting cortisol overwrite the self that was already there. And slowly, repetition by repetition, that self came back. That's the whole promise, made small enough to believe. Not transformation into a stranger. A return to the person stress had been quietly carving away. And if it's true for a surgeon in Seattle who simply refused to keep calling her temper, then the only real question left is what this changes about you. Not what you do. Who you are. So let's make this personal, because everything up to now has been mechanism and story, and none of it matters until it changes how you see yourself tonight. Here's the shift, and it's larger than it sounds. You've spent years believing that the reactive, short-fused, exhausted version of you was you. A fixed fact. Something to apologize for, or manage, or hide. What you understand now is that it was never identity. It was a state. A chemical weather system you'd been living inside so long you mistook it for the climate. And the moment that lands, really lands, something loosens that you didn't know was clenched. Because if it's a state, it's not a verdict. The patience you thought you'd lost isn't gone. It's been outvoted. The clarity you used to have isn't a younger man's gift you aged out of. It's been running on reduced power. The person your kids remember from the good years, the one your partner fell for, the one who could sit with a hard problem without his pulse climbing. That person didn't die. He got buried under a signal that never switched off. And signals can be switched off. This is the part the cynic in you needs to hear plainly, because the cynic is right to distrust easy transformation. This isn't transformation. Nobody's asking you to become someone you're not. The work isn't building a better self. It's uncovering the one chronic stress has been sanding away. That's a far more honest promise, and a far more achievable one. You're not climbing toward a stranger. You're excavating yourself. And notice what that does to the weight you've been carrying. The guilt about the snapping, the shame about the weight, the quiet fear that you'd become someone harder than you meant to be, all of it rested on the belief that this is just who I am now. Lift that belief, and the guilt has nowhere to stand. You weren't failing at being a good person. You were hosting a chemical that made good behavior cost triple. That's not an excuse, It's the opposite. It's the precise location of the lever. Here's what changes when you hold this. You stop fighting yourself, and you start changing your state. Those are completely different wars. One is exhausting and unwinnable. You can't willpower your way out of your own biology. The other is just engineering. Lower the cortisol. Restore the reflective brain. Practice the new pathway until it's the default. Build the scaffolding so you don't have to do it on willpower alone. It's not easy, but it's possible, in a way that just be a calmer person never was. And the deepest change is this. You stop seeing your body and your brain as obstacles to push through, and start seeing them as the instrument you actually live through. The founder treated his body like a vehicle carrying his brain from meeting to meeting, right up until the morning it stopped. You don't have to learn it that way. You can decide, now, that the thing you've been overriding was never the obstacle. It was the control panel of your entire life, and you've been ignoring every warning light on it for years. The person you've been calling yourself was a draft written under threat. You get to write the next one in safety, and the science says you can. There's one last thing I need you to take with you. The smallest possible first step, the one that actually starts the rewiring tonight. The first step is smaller than you think, and it costs nothing, and you can do it the moment this ends. Sit down, 5 minutes, and do something your stressed brain has been too busy surviving to allow. Picture the version of you that's already on the other side of this. Not vaguely. Specifically, the one who sleeps through the night, who comes home and softens instead of sharpens, who makes the hard call from clarity instead of fear. See it. Feel it in your body. And then, this is the part that does the work. Be grateful for it as if it were already true. That's not a motivational exercise. It's neurological. In those 5 minutes, you're moving your brain out of a threat state and into a trust state. And the trust state is the only ground the reflective brain can stand on. You're not visualizing a fantasy. You're switching off the alarm long enough to remember the door is right there. That's where every other change begins. Fear can't rewire anything. Safety can. Do that tomorrow morning, then again. And let it be the on-ramp to the 4 stages. Awareness, attention, practice, accountability, built on a foundation of sleep, movement, and getting the signal out instead of holding it in. Now let me ask you to do one thing that costs more than 5 minutes, because it matters more. Think of 5 people in your life who are exactly where the founder was. Composed on the outside. Praised for holding it together. Quietly being overwritten, and certain they've got it handled. They will never search for this. The whole nature of the trap is that you don't go looking for a thing you can't feel. So it has to find them. Send this to those 5 people, not as a favor to me, as the thing that reaches them before the morning they're tying their shoes. And then leave a comment. One honest line about which part landed, and what you want me to take apart next. I read them. They shape what comes. Here's the last thing, and I want you to feel it close the loop we opened at the very start. We began with a chemical running in your brain that you couldn't feel and didn't start. And the whole time, you thought the danger was the stress. It was never the stress. The danger was believing it had become you. It hasn't. You're still in there. Go switch off the alarm and go get yourself back.